Right, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayerStoo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayerStoo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayerStoo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast, that really, really helps us out. There's a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and while you're over there, if you could give us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And you can review on Spotify now. If you want to be a double legend, do it on both. Do it on both. It really, really helps us out. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley, and we are back in your house again, despite what I promised would be the last time.
You just can't keep away from this place anymore, it seems.
Yeah, it does seem that way. So I've now got the laptop, Lewis. I've now got the laptop, and I had so little foresight to get any adapters to convert the stuff that we needed into a new MacBook Pro, which has no USB ports apart from USB-Cs, which meant our equipment didn't work. Yeah. So we're now back here with my old laptop again.
Yeah, you said off air that you had been stupid, but you've got to pin a certain amount of blame on Apple here for continually putting out products.
No, they're
no
pushing
connections
forward. They
that
are
anyone
absolutely pushing forward.
use.
No, they have 3 USB-C ports, which I'm very happy about. However, the rest of the world hasn't quite caught up to the USB-C only world that Apple wants to live in. Yeah. So
well, at least it's not lightning bolts anymore.
Anyway, Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Just more Hades, Mark, to be honest. Just cracking through Hades, smashing bosses, flirting with the gods, all that good stuff. But yeah, we're going to be talking about that towards the end of the show for our PlayAlong discussion this week. So I'll pretty much just bite my tongue on this one for now. I guess we won't talk too much about my individual playthroughs when we get to that point, but we'll have quite a chunky chat about the game later on. So I'll park that for now. What have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, I've been playing a game which you don't know what I've been playing.
I don't know, yeah. You're keeping it very secretive. I thought about opening my PlayStation app there to see what I'd been pinging on your side.
Well, Lewis, you would have found nothing because I've been playing it on Xbox.
Oh,
there you go. There you go. It is Psychonauts. The original Psychonauts. Nice. Which is a very, very interesting gaming experience, considering this game came out in 2005 on the original Xbox.
Wow, is it as old as that?
I didn't realise it was as old as that either, Lewis, but it suddenly struck me when it was in 4:3 aspect ratio.
God almighty. The kids don't even know what that is.
That really struck me. I have to say that it is really a throwback to that era of gaming. It is muddy textures, muddy colours. All the characters resemble like weird 90s cartoons. Like they all are like weirdly proportioned, and everyone's a bit sort of gross. It sort of reminds me of Ren and Stimpy a little bit.
Exactly, yeah.
But underneath all that, do you know what, man? Like, there's a very creative, but weird, but sort of genius game. And I already, and I've not played a lot of it, I have to say, sort of admire it. And it has, like, those old 90s cartoons. It has genuinely hilarious moments. Like, genuinely funny moments.
Rare in games.
I mean, it's really stupid humour, I'm not going to lie, but it just fucking lands sometimes with these ridiculous little old low-poly characters that all these people are, you know what I mean? It reminded me of a much simpler time in video games, Liz, I have to say, where a game didn't have to be any more than it simply was. It didn't have to be a pseudo fucking marketplace for microtransactions or NFTs, as we're now getting into, and it didn't have to be 90 hours long, and it didn't have to be full of copy and pasted missions. Honestly, I booted it up, and when I saw that aspect ratio and the fact that the fonts were huge because they were all designed to be on CRT TVs and shit like that, and I was just like, oh my god, I didn't realise the game was that old, and I was like, oh, this might be a step too far. I might be putting this controller down pretty quickly. And it was one of these ones, Liz, where I turned around and looked at my phone and it was 2 a.m, and I was like, oh shit, I need to go to bed, because I'd just been playing this old game from 2005 for ages, and I absolutely loved it. It was great. It was absolutely great fun.
Very good. Is it the writing that's making you kind of feel like that about it, or is it, I mean, what kind of game is it? Is it a platformer basically?
Yeah. I mean, it basically is a 3D platformer, which famously I'm not so into most of the time, right? But it is just, I was assuming that you know what Psychonauts is actually about. Like, you dive into people's minds and stuff like that, and the stuff that they sort of play around with and that is really clever. It's really, really clever. Like, I totally understand. And I understood this almost immediately just turning it on, why it is such a cult classic, why people gravitate towards it, why when the second one came out, despite the fact that probably me and you looking at it at the time were like, why is everyone so excited about this game? But having played the original now and seen why people had such love for it, and it is probably like why people love those old 90s cartoons, you know what I mean, and why there is such a weird adult cult following around a lot of them, like Ren and Stimpy. They were just weird and creative and different and just totally making their own path. Do you know what I mean? They were just doing their own thing. They were totally them. I sort of admire it for that. Like, yes, the controllers are fucking janky as fuck, right? Does he jump when I want him to? Sometimes. But and then, as I said, the colours are like really murky and whatever.
Shades of brown.
Really sort of brown vibe to it, yeah. And of course it was, and that was to do with the power at the time. Like, you can't hold that against the game, I don't think. But man, I really fucking enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Nice one. So have you beat it, or are you still?
No, not even close. No. I've really only scratched the surface, to be honest with you, which is sort of exciting because I was like, there was an objective marker over there, but I spent ages just wandering about all these low poly, murky, badly textured areas just because it was sort of fun to dick around, and it was weird, and you kept on running into weird little characters everywhere. Nice. It was fantastically good fun, and it was just an incredibly honest video game experience, which I really appreciated.
Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's a rare thing these days. I assume that this is all building towards a playthrough of the second game.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I very much want to play Psychonauts 2. I did want to play Psychonauts 2 before the Game Awards. The reason I probably didn't even attempt to start Psychonauts 2 before the Game Awards is because I wanted to play the first game first. I did not realise it was this old. But I'm really glad that I did. I'm really glad
so far so good, it sounds like.
It really is. I've went back and played old games a few times, usually even older games than this, and sometimes you're just like, oh, we've moved past this. I mean, I appreciate this game for what it is, but we've long moved past this. But there's things in Psychonauts that I'm just like, that's really good. That's really clever, and you've done something weird here, and it sort of worked in this weird, mad world that you've made, Tim Schafer. So fair play to you. Fair play to you for this. Anyway, Lewis, I think it is time for the news. All right, Lewis. Well, before we get into this, I suppose, I think our first and second news items here are inextricably linked. They are the continued fallout from the Microsoft and Activision deal, which I think we will be talking about for a long, long time, and the fact that PlayStation have now bought Bungie for $3.6 billion, which is just absolutely insane, but we're going to get into it. So, kicking things off, news item number one with more Activision news. Like we said the last time, this is going to be ongoing for weeks and weeks and weeks, months, probably years perhaps. But the latest from Bloomberg seems to be that Activision are committed to releasing at least the next 3 Call of Duty games on PlayStation. This is presumably what PlayStation meant when they said that they expected Activision and subsequently Microsoft to abide by the existing contractual agreements. Obviously, those contractual agreements were for the next 3 Call of Duty games. This will include, apparently, Modern Warfare 2, or remake of Modern Warfare 2, or the successor to the second Modern Warfare. Not really sure what we're doing with that, but yep, Modern Warfare 2 by Infinity Ward, which is coming out this year. The next installment in the Black Ops series by Treyarch, which is coming in 2023. And the sequel to Warzone 2, which will also apparently be coming out in 2023. However, I think that it is pretty unclear what will be happening after that, and I am still of the opinion and strongly suspect that whatever Call of Duty comes out in 2024, or hopefully they decide to go once every couple of years or take a little break in the way that Ubisoft done with Assassin's Creed, and it isn't every single year there's a new Call of Duty, but after these releases in 2023, whatever's happening in 2024 will be very, very interesting. I am still of the opinion that whatever the next mainline Call of Duty game to come after that will not be on PlayStation.
Yeah, I think I pretty much still agree with you on that. This is kind of harking back to what we were talking about last week, just in relation to that whole, will Microsoft honour that deal? What would that deal even include? And I think I said at that point, you know, there is a chance here that these deals are multi-year in terms of their setup. I thought it would probably still be longer, or there was a chance it would be longer than that. But
sure.
But I guess if this deal was negotiated in 2018, then this makes sense.
Yeah, it probably makes sense,
So,
exactly, yeah.
So I think that's exactly where we're at. My hunch is still that Warzone 2, if it releases on PlayStation, it will remain on PlayStation at least until the end of that life cycle. Whether or not a Warzone 3 then also launches on PlayStation, I think is another question, but more solidly than that, I do think that you're absolutely right, that the next proper mainline annual Call of Duty game won't be on PlayStation after the end of next calendar year, unless some deal gets struck in between times or whatever might come of it all. But I think that that's where we're heading. I think people need to start getting to grips with that idea, because this is the same thing that happened with Bethesda. We debated it for so long. I mean, we haven't really seen the reality yet, but we know what's going to happen there now, and the sooner that people begin to accept it and start to make their peace with it, or consider buying an Xbox, or consider giving up Call of Duty or whatever it may be, the better it's going to be for everyone involved.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. So the next piece of news, also reported by Bloomberg, is that the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission in the United States, will be reviewing the acquisition of Activision on grounds of antitrust. However, it seems as though it will not be reviewed by the US Justice Department, who apparently works with the FTC on such cases. I believe that this is what actually happened to the Nvidia ARM deal that recently fell apart.
Yeah.
I think it basically strung out from an FTC investigation, and subsequently the Justice Department were involved, and then the whole thing basically dissolved. I don't actually know if that's fully confirmed to be dissolved, but I think it's basically heading out the window. Neither Microsoft or the FTC have commented as yet, as you would expect, to be completely honest. But last week, as we discussed, analyst David Cole told GamesIndustry.biz that he doesn't think that Call of Duty will go Xbox exclusive purely to get past the regulators. But as we discussed last week as well, does that just mean these next 3 games? Does that mean in eternum? Or if they start changing up Call of Duty and they do it once every 2 years and it doesn't have as big a revenue as it currently does, will that make a difference? It's such a complicated question. So, while it is official that this is being looked into, which is something you would expect from a deal of this size, it does seem as though the fact that the Justice Department isn't getting involved basically makes me think that it's going to be fine, and this is just the FTC basically doing their due diligence. I think that this will basically sail through.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that, without really knowing any of the ins and outs of all of this, or like what the FTC can do or typically do, or any of that stuff. It's just not part of my knowledge set at all.
Nope. Well, US Trade Commission law isn't part of your knowledge set list.
Funnily enough. No, I just can't think that the deal would even have got to the point of making the announcement if Microsoft weren't very, very sure that it would basically all be fine. I'm sure there will be some T's to cross and some I's to dots, but it's going to all pan out, essentially. Even if it is a case that certain parts of the game library or certain IP within what they've bought maybe have to be treated in slightly different ways to avoid monopolization, possibly. I still think all of that is less likely than basically going through unchallenged, or again, as we both think, if Warzone is left on PlayStation, and that is still a way that PlayStation could continue to make money from Call of Duty, even because they'll take a percentage cut presumably on microtransactions on the platform, then it's very hard to argue that they have been completely cut out from that. They've still got a revenue potential there. So I think that this is all going to be fine. Again, start making your peace with it. Stop thinking the FTC is going to save you PlayStation fans. Yeah,
it's definitely not, I would say. As a bit of a side note here, and just to remind you how big the scumbaggery is at Activision, Lewis, Vice President of QA Christian Arens messaged staff seemingly discouraging their unionisation, which might be expected but is no less shitty, let's be honest. But he did also outright lie, saying that it would not matter to job security if you're part of a union, which is categorically untrue as far as I'm concerned, and could affect game quality, which is entirely in his hands and not the QA testers. This is obviously bullshit. It definitely increases your job security, and this is also in the face of 12 QA testers at Raven being terminated on the 28th of January, just past, basically for no reason. So job security isn't exactly at a premium there just now, you know what I mean? And that was at a time where Warzone was apparently raking in 5.3 million a day.
Yeah.
A day. I would also strongly argue, Lewis, that if your workforce felt as if they were secure in their jobs and had things like, I don't know, like a living wage, things like that, that would probably be a recipe for better games, not worse games.
Well, particularly in the States where healthcare might come under a union contract.
Things like that. Might be things for like staying alive. Yeah, that would be really useful.
Those might be the kind of things that make people feel more comfortable producing games. But yeah, just also the idea that unionisation would change the quality of the game criticism in the negative sense is just completely absurd. It's just nonsense. The only way I can see that would be true is if what he means is we won't be hiring so many people anymore, because if they're unionised we won't pay them, so we'll get some contractors in or whatever that aren't unionised, and that might well affect the quality of the game, but that's his fault.
Yeah,
so,
that's not the union's fault, that's his fucking fault.
It's just complete nonsense. They are raking it in. It's time to just back the employees and sort this stuff out, which hopefully will be the case once this acquisition goes through.
Utter nonsense. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how Microsoft deals with the unionisation deal, because I think I've said on this before, they are also famously not hugely a fan of the union.
No, not at all.
Alright, listen, news item number 2, and as we discussed, PlayStation have bought Bungie for $3.6 billion. Bungie are obviously the creators of Destiny and were the original creators of Halo back in the day. Bungie have emphasised that they will remain a, quotes, independent subsidiary of PlayStation, and apparently will remain self-publishing and creatively independent, at least when it comes to Destiny, which we'll come to in a minute. They have also said that Destiny would remain multi-platform, as you would expect, similarly to what Microsoft is doing with Warzone, but have also confirmed that future games will not be PlayStation exclusive either, which is actually a fairly radical move for a PlayStation-owned studio. Now, I'm not sure that actually means what a lot of people necessarily think that it means, because I'm still not sure that whatever Bungie's next game is after Destiny, I'm not sure that game will appear on Xbox. What I do think is that game will appear day one on PC, thereby not making it a PlayStation exclusive, you see. Bungie had previously said that they wanted to bring at least one new IP to market by 2025. I'll be very interested to see what happens with that game, because that'll be the truth, won't it? You know what I mean? Whether or not that appears on Xbox. Also, there has been a lot of, quite frankly, daft chatter around the internet, basically saying that this was PlayStation's response to the Activision deal, and that PlayStation were somehow holding Destiny hostage over Call of Duty, or as like a bargaining chip to make sure that Call of Duty stays on PlayStation, and to therefore have something to pull the rug out under Microsoft if they decide to take it off. Quite frankly, that is all an absolute bunch of nonsense. That is absolutely not how these deals are done whatsoever. A $3.6 billion deal does not come together in a matter of weeks. This has been in talks for months and months and months and months and months. This is to help PlayStation with their lack of service games, which is something that they've spoken about, like, as a part of the industry that they want to grow into. And I would say that this is much more likely to be a response to the Bethesda deal than the Activision deal, to be completely honest. But I actually don't believe it's truly a response to either. I think that they are trying to grow in response to Microsoft growing, I suppose, but the nature of these deals isn't like directly, like, it's not as insidious as that. It's just weird to think that that's how. Well, I think that's a very, I suppose, console war-y narrative that we all like to believe. Absolutely. And it might sound great, but I really don't think that it is that at all, to be completely honest. What this definitely is, though, is further consolidation of the industry, Lewis, which we talked about at length between the Microsoft and Activision deal. Now, granted, this deal is not even on the scale of the Activision deal, which is just absolutely colossal. It is nonetheless two massive players in the video games industry becoming one massive player in the video games industry. And CEO Jim Ryan has also said to GamesIndustry.biz very explicitly that he is not done making acquisitions and that we should definitely expect more. And even Jeff Keighley today tweeted that he has heard that multiple big deals are in the final stages. Other big acquisitions, he never said anymore, but basically you can take that comment for what it is, because as you pointed out to me, he basically just said business is happening. But I mean, I think in the framework of what is just happened here, like, it is a notable comment, you know. So how do you feel about this deal generally, not just the consolidation stuff, but overall for PlayStation and Bungie, I suppose?
Overall, it took me by surprise. I think it took everyone by surprise.
Certainly,
I think it's a shrewd move from Sony to partner up with Bungie in this quite unusual way. I mean, I say shrewd move from Sony. I actually think Bungie have once again shown themselves to be one of the shrewdest operators in all of gaming. They have now got themselves out of exclusivity deals with two major publishers, Xbox and Activision. Yeah. They have self-published, they have developed the Destiny brand to the point where it is essentially a kind of platform in itself, so much so that it's worth a $3 billion price tag to Sony. And they have done that in a way where they aren't actually bought in the way that we have been speaking about Activision or Bethesda even. Like, they maintain creative and publishing independence. interesting to see how all that is going to play out, because I mean, Sony's greatest strength in the last 10 years has been get studios
exclusive deals
and pump out amazing games through that. And so this is a change, this is an interesting shift, I think. But if it works for Bungie, it seems like this is what Bungie wanted. There have been rumours that Microsoft were in discussion with Bungie again, I think last year, and it seems that basically that independence that they want and the price tag were probably too much. And now obviously it's been proven that the price tag wasn't actually too much for Microsoft, but possibly immediately on the back of a $7 billion deal it may have been to buy up more studios. But the main thing to me is probably that they would not have been willing to allow Bungie to continue publishing elsewhere. That's a lot of conjecture, obviously there's no real reports on that yet, but for Sony to come in and recognise what Bungie can bring to their portfolio, and we'll come back to that in a wee second, but what they can bring to that and decide that it is worth altering their business model, I think is quite an impressive thing on all fronts. We will come back to the consolidation point too, though, because I don't want to sound overly positive about it. I'm not a Destiny player, I wasn't a Halo player, so like again, this doesn't mean a great deal to me. I think it's probably good for Bungie because they no longer have the risk of doing it all themselves, but they do also have experience of having to get out of these contracts when things don't work out the way that they hope. So
well, you would hope that this one was the correct contract.
Hopefully, they finally kind of struck the balance right, and PlayStation seemingly are a good company to work under. We don't hear many rumblings from their development studios other than, I guess, some of the people who left Bend after Days Gone. About stuff not really
Bend
working
was the main
out.
one. Bend and Crunch.
I mean Crunch definitely. That's a whole other thing. But I just mean in terms of like getting the support from the higher ups, getting to do what you want and all that kind of thing. And I think that what this represents for Sony and for PlayStation and for PlayStation fans is this move towards PC gaming is one thing, definitely, but also this move towards live service. I've been intrigued by the growth in... We saw Ghost of Tsushima Legends come out. We know that Naughty Dog are working on a Last of Us multiplayer. There have been rumours that, in fact, not even rumours, I think we know that Insomniac are hiring for a multiplayer project just now.
I believe we do know that.
Because we were talking before about whether that would be Spider-Man or would be something else. Maybe it'll be Wolverine now.
Who knows?
But what Bungie do is they inject a complete knowledge of this whole sector. They know live service, they know roadmaps. You were talking before about how impressive their roadmap is at the moment for Destiny.
I think it goes out to 2024, I think, which is pretty impressive. I've got to say,
they've learned the lessons. They started this game really of doing the big live service shooters on consoles. They hit a lot of pitfalls along the way. The launch of Destiny 1 was a bit of a shambles.
The launch of Destiny 2 was a bit of a shambles.
But they know how to do it, and they bring that expertise into the fold, and you can see that will start to influence other PlayStation games. For me personally, I have a little bit of hesitancy about that because I don't love multiplayer games, and I don't want to go in a direction where that becomes the driving force and not the single player experience. But hopeful that at least the Bungie model of all of that, if you look at Destiny, it's constant story updates, it's long-term storytelling, it's dragging players in and keeping them in that universe and making them want to be there, and that stuff is exciting. So I'm kind of optimistic. I think it's an interesting deal. From the consolidation point of view, not great. As simple as that.
No, it's not.
It's not as big a deal, obviously, as the Activision deal, as you said.
No, but I think just, again, with the framework of that Activision deal just having happened, now this deal happens as well. Again, much, but like totally different scale, but it's still another big player that's now not there.
Exactly. And it's indicative, and as you've said, they are even saying out loud,
this is not the end. We're going to do this more. Yeah.
And so you can see, Xbox could do anything. Xbox could buy literally anyone. It could come as a shock. It could not. We just have no idea. Whatever they're going to do will just change everything again and again. PlayStation have, as we have discussed at length on different episodes of this podcast, are doing quite an interesting business model at the moment where they're partnering with a lot of studios. They're buying up smaller teams. They've bought up studios that look after PC ports, remasters, multiplayer games. You can see how everything fits together. This unlocks something different, and you could continue to see Sony doing that, cherry picking from across the industry. Who's another great single player studio? Okay, we'll bring them in. Who's going to crack this particular market for us? We'll bring them in. Who's a great indie studio? We'll bring them in. Whereas Xbox, could at any moment just create an earthquake and change everything. And I worry about us being in that position where it's these 2 or 3 big guns who are just going to pick up all the talent, and having all the jobs and all the IP and everything under one roof has its advantages, but it also has some major disadvantages. And I worry that we're heading towards a point where there are only 2, 3, 4 major publishers left, and then maybe an indie market below that.
I mean, to think now that outside of the platform holders, two of the major publishers are totally gone in Bethesda and Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I remember when Activision and Blizzard came together, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Now the two of them are gone as well. Absolutely insane. Like crazy stuff that's happening right now. Yeah, the third party market is very interesting. Obviously the consolidation stuff, not great, and I will be very, very interested to see what happens with whatever Bungie's next game is in 2025 or whatever, what they'll do with that. Will it come to Xbox? Will it just be PlayStation and PC? Very, very interesting. Might be the first PlayStation Studios game to launch simultaneously on PlayStation and on PC. Also, I'm not really sure if they're going to get the PlayStation Studios like moniker, because they are like this weird subsidiary. It's all up there. It's all up there.
I imagine we'll get the logo, but you know, they might not push that message too hard, because Bungie is a thing in itself that people believe in. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, in the genre of first person shooter, I mean, they are absolutely top of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, basically them and maybe id.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned,
much,
they are absolutely top tier. So it's a very good purchase by PlayStation, and I hope it works out for both parties, frankly. Yeah. All right, let's news item number 3. Sticking with PlayStation, one of their other big partnerships recently was with Discord. Sony have made a minority investment in Discord last year and subsequently announced a partnership. And while the integration with PlayStation 4/5 has been a bit slow, to say the least, it does seem as though in the US and in Europe, you can now link your PlayStation and Discord accounts, meaning that on Discord, you can see and display your PlayStation activity, very similar to what is already available on Discord for Steam and for Xbox. And to be honest with you, this isn't very interesting. However, the statement that Discord made, I think reads as though this is sort of only the beginning of the integration. It made me feel as though there was more to come in the future here, and hopefully what that is going to be a deeper integration with Discord, meaning that you can get voice chat natively on PS5 ideally. I think that is really what everyone's looking for here, and assuming that you can do that, maybe you can just get access to all your servers and the entirety of Discord through the PlayStation 5. I think that would be the dream, to be honest, because right now the PlayStation voice chat, quite frankly, is not great and is a pain in the arse. And also, Xbox One, while probably is slightly better, still isn't all that great. There's a very good reason why everyone turns to Discord. I will say that, because it is very good and it is the best system to use, at least in my experience, I would say. And honestly, I think that this would be a really big boon for PlayStation, actually. I think that it would be great for them to be able to say, all you online console gamers out there, why don't you play on PlayStation? Because you can have your entire Discord at your disposal running in the background natively on PlayStation. You don't need a PC running beside you doing that at the same time. It can all just be there on one system, totally integrated. I think that would be a really big deal, and it would be a sort of not directly game-related way to like sell the PS5, do you know what I mean? Which right now the game related stuff is the only reason to buy a PS5.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's nail on the head, really. I don't have too much to add on this one, because it doesn't seem like much has transpired so far from this partnership, but if this is indicating that some kind of closer relationship between the two, some kind of greater integration is the future, I totally agree. I mean, God, Mark, when we were playing It Takes Two remotely, when we were trying to set up voice chats to talk to one another, and that is just two people who
to be fair, the PlayStation 5 was quite new at the time, and we didn't have a fucking clue what we were doing.
Yeah, it was a shambles. I just think a lot of that side of PlayStation's like UI and UX stuff isn't the best. I mean, that's well documented.
No, I think, to be honest with you, the PS5 UI, when I first saw it, I actually thought, this is quite good, interesting stuff that they're doing with the cards. I think in practice, actually, I don't like it very much. No. And I actually think it's a step back probably from the PS4.
Yeah, it's too similar and at once too different from what they used to do. So buttons that did one thing before do a similar thing but not quite the same. So when you press that home button, you think it's going to do one thing and it doesn't.
The home button.
And that just extends into that kind of voice chat and party creation stuff that, again, I don't do a great deal of. So someone more qualified than I will be able to tell you what's good about it and what isn't. But to me, the idea of just being able to launch your Discord and have all your chats there, and even just forget gaming, you could be sat on your couch having Discord conversations with your mates kind of thing. Like, definitely. I think that is something that does turn it not just into a gaming device but into this this wider kind of living room entertainment centre, which is a term that I think we used to use in the last generation and it's maybe gone away, but essentially that's what they're all heading towards, right? All the apps, all the services, everything there, and make it nice and smooth to use.
Just get it on there, definitely. I also think with the stuff that PlayStation's doing with like their picture-in-picture stuff and whatever, like that could work really, really well with Discord as well. So I definitely hope to see more from this partnership, because right now we only have this, and this isn't that interesting, let's be honest. Alright, let's news item number 4, and now it's time for NFT Corner. Boo! Boo! I strongly suspect that this will unfortunately be a running segment that we will be having here, Lewis, because NFTs do seem to be quite persistent and not fucking off the way that we all want them to. First thing that I wanted to mention here was Team 17 have announced that they would be introducing NFTs to Worms. They claimed that these NFTs were environmentally friendly, quotes, but of course they weren't, because they're NFTs and by their very nature they are not environmentally friendly. This was met with an absolutely scathing backlash from the games industry, and rightly fucking so. It was later discovered that a lot of staff at Team 17 had no knowledge whatsoever of the NFTs until the announcement, which I think tells you a lot about the management at Team 17 and how they thought this announcement was going to go in the first place, and it also tells you how much they respect or do not respect their staff whatsoever. Several studios whose games were published by Team 17 have also responded very angrily to this announcement. They also had no idea that this announcement would be happening, and it caused harassment of their staff online. This included Platonic Games, who make Yooka-Laylee, and Ghost Town Games, who make Overcooked, both of whom openly said that they would not be including NFTs in their games and that they do not support this decision. But I would direct you towards a statement made by indie studio Aggro Crab, because it was the most truthful and the most hilarious. We will link to that in the show notes at PlayersToo.com. Secondly, and marginally better news, I suppose, famed voice actor Troy Baker has ended his NFT partnership. This was the NFT firm that sought to put voice actors like Troy Baker out of a fucking job. He then backed this partnership up with a hilariously stupid hate or create tweet that is now fairly infamous. We can link to that over in the show notes at PlayersToo.com as well, painting basically everyone who had a problem with NFTs as a hater, rather than someone who was voicing very obvious and very real concerns with them. While I'm definitely glad that Troy Baker has reversed this decision, I do wish he had done some slightly better research before he immediately grabbed what I am sure was an enormous check. However, the voice acting rip-off company is still very much active. They have been given vastly more publicity than they ever deserved, and they are still trying to steal the job of voice actors, and all of this off the back of comments of one of their own. So, little victory, but not great still. And finally, Lewis, and by far the fucking worst, in an interview with an Australian finance site called Finder, one of Ubisoft's VPs, Nicolas Punard, has defended the company's use of NFTs and stated his intentions to push ahead with them despite the absolutely gigantic backlash, saying infuriatingly that players, quote, just don't get it, Lewis. We just don't get it. As I said, this obviously came after an absolutely gigantic backlash against NFT's invasion of video game space, but it's cool because we just don't get it. Kotaku last month also revealed that several of Ubisoft's own studios didn't approve of the NFT push, but Lewis, they just don't get it. And since then, the GDC have surveyed over 2,700 game developers, and it has shown that 70% of them had no interest whatsoever in implementing NFTs at all, but they just don't get it. And to this condescending, morally corrupt, fucking corporate arsehole that is Nicolas Punard, absolutely go fuck yourself, sir. The problem is not that we don't get it. The problem is that too many of us do get it. We see it for the fucking grift, the fucking con that it is. We see that it does not improve video games whatsoever. We see it as a blatant money-making scheme, and we see the fact that you simply don't care about the social, economic, or environmental impacts that NFT have on the world. Absolutely go fuck yourself, you miserable bastard. What I have to say, though, is that I think that gamers and gaming gaming communities quite often get a bad rap, and quite frankly that bad rap, Lewis, is often deserved, as hard as that is to hear for a lot of gamers. However, I think that the collective fuck you that the gaming community has said to NFTs is absolutely amazing, frankly. I think that we have to keep resisting this push by massive publishers to incorporate them into gaming, because if you give them an inch, they will take a fucking mile, and when it is integrated and it is normalised, then it's done. You know what I mean? It's over at that point. So I'm glad that this backlash is happening and it continues to happen, and I hope that the pushback is heard by the publishers.
Yeah, you'd think that it absolutely has to be heard at some point, maybe not right now, but watching not only players but development studios themselves come out, game industry executives coming out and saying that they're not interested in this and they don't want anything to do with this is really encouraging and reassuring that maybe it is not as inevitable as it has seemed at times.
But for every one of them, you've got this twat and Sega copywriting their Sega NFTs logo and all that. Do you know what I mean? So it's
like it's still there, it's still coming in different forms, but I think that there is enough of a resistance to it, and people are day by day learning more and more and more about it, and the word about this nonsense is spreading. So I don't know, it's an interesting thing, because I think that we're doing the right thing by talking about it a lot just now, because it is coming and it is happening to the gaming space, and it is important that people are aware of it. But then also, you know, I worry sometimes are we part of the issue of over publicizing these things, but you can't help it. You just can't help it when Ubisoft and Sega and various others continually try it and continually say it, and like to listen to an Ubisoft executive having seen their own attempt to do this kind of fall on its arse, like the first
absolutely falling
the first run
they had to take the YouTube video down, it was getting so badly downloaded.
But they launched that NFT store or whatever within or for Ghost Recon, and nobody was interested, nobody bought anything from it, and so he's the one that doesn't get it, but he just wants us to think. I mean, this is the classic thing with all of these like pyramid schemes and grifts like this. You double down by saying they just don't get it yet. I'm the smart one and you're the idiot. It's just not.
Honestly,
that's not the case.
See this interview, see the way he was talking. Honestly, I wanted to slap the man in the face. He was like, "We at Ubisoft, we see the end game." That was another one of it. I was just like, "Fuck."
Yeah, the end game is their bank balance.
Exactly.
I saw
fucking bottom line.
One suggestion on Twitter that, you know, let's talk when you start selling your games as NFTs with all the fucking fanciful nonsense promises that brings. So we would actually own the game and it would be ours to sell to other people, and you wouldn't get a cut of that. Let's talk when you're willing to do that, Ubisoft. I doubt that is going to happen.
No, I seriously doubt that's going to happen. Yeah, man, it's scary. Like, honestly, this stuff's scary, and fuck NFTs, fuck this guy, fuck everyone who's involved with NFTs. I have no time for them. I would say that if you want to learn more about NFTs, fantastic YouTube video was put out by a guy called Folding Ideas, which is the name of the YouTube channel. I can't remember what the guy's actual name is. Dan Olsen, maybe? I can't remember. It was very, very good, and it's called The Line Goes Up, The Problem with NFTs, I think. It's fantastic. It's like 2 hours long, to be clear. Put it on fast forward, I would say. Put it on like 2 times speed and listen to it like a podcast like this. It is very, very, very informative and really buries into the problems with NFTs, the blockchain in general, and why it is all a fucking grift, and it's all a terrible, terrible idea. Alright, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. First podcast of the month, that means free games, Lewis. On PlayStation Plus, you are getting Planet Coasters, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragonskeep, and EA Sports UFC 4, which is not a great slate, let's be honest. And on Games Pass, you're getting Contrast, Dreamscaper, Telling Lies, Besieged, Crossfire X, Edge of Eternity, Skull the Hero Slayer, The Last Kid on Earth and the Staff of Doom, Ark Ultimate Survivor Edition, and Infernax. And leaving Games Pass is Control, Code Vein, Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age, The Medium, Project Winter, and The Falconeer. I have to say, not great from both, because it does seem as though the best games on Games Pass are leaving and not arriving this month.
Yeah, although Telling Lies is worth checking out for sure. If you're on Game Pass, give that a go.
Sure, and I'm also very intrigued by this Crossfire X campaign done by Remedy, I have to say.
Yeah.
Wonder if that's any good. Alright, let's shout out number 2. Pokemon Legends Arceus has come out this week, and it might be kind of great, ? It's currently sitting with a very respectable 84 on Metacritic, which was higher, considerably higher, I would say, than Sword and Shield. It does seem as though the game mostly delivers on Pokemon open world game, I guess, and by most accounts it is a breath of fresh air for the series, which is really great to hear, because I think that the Pokemon games have long been held back by the formulaic nature of the original games, and quite frankly those games came out in the fucking 90s. Like, we need to move on. Pokemon has to be made for the 21st century now. Gaming has moved on, our tastes have moved on, and it is very good to see that this is firmly a step, it looks like, in the right direction, and I very much believe that.
Yeah, really encouraging review scores for that. It is the most interesting looking and sounding Pokemon game that I remember basically since we were kids. I'm not a big Pokemon fan. I'm curious to find out whether you think that you will play this now. You've kind of been hot and cold about it over the months.
I did think that the trailers looked terrible at points.
I think
Absolutely
the game
terrible.
Looks like dog shit, to be totally honest, and that's the biggest criticism of it so far, is that visually it's really not up to scratch. I watched some gameplay stuff of it, having been quite intrigued, and was a wee bit let down by that. I think because I was expecting something closer to the full kind of Breath of the Wild experience, whereas it does look a lot more in some ways like a kind of Monster Hunter, but also just a bit of a collectathon, like go around and just throw Pokeballs at stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, that would have been an innovation I'd like to see change, but it's nice, like now it's just a lot more slick and modern, and it's just like very neat and tidy little cleanups on the core formula that I hope they then take forward into the other games.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, let's shout out number 3. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection has also come out this week, currently sitting with a very nice 87 on Metacritic, which is between Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy, the previous renditions of them, which seems about right, to be honest.
Yep.
This is basically a PS5 remaster of those games put together in a bundle. I don't really think there's much to say here, if I'm completely honest. These games were very well received when they first came out, and there is no reason why they shouldn't be well received now. And isn't it just lucky that it is coming out a few weeks before the movie list?
Oh yeah, funny that, eh?
Alright, and final shout out number 4. Netflix have signed a partnership with Rocket Ride Games to add additional games to their mobile library. In some regions, you can already access Netflix games through their Netflix mobile app, although for me and you here, Lewis, it doesn't look as if we can yet, unfortunately. And this is just another interesting move by Netflix, as they are quietly but quite firmly moving into the video game space. They did announce in July that they would be looking to move into the video game space, and they do seem to be just staying in mobile right now, really. But I'm always wondering, to be honest with you, about the purchase of Night School Studios, who done Oxenfree and will soon be releasing Oxenfree 2, or it should be coming out this year at least. And in reality, they are by far the best placed to provide a service like Stadia, you know what I mean? So it'll be very interesting to see what developments come of this, or if they are just going to keep continuing down this mobile track that they've got on just now.
Yeah, it seems very much like added value for the Netflix service at the moment, and not like a really core thing that they're pushing.
Agreed, yeah.
But, you know, those are the right kinds of... Well, certainly the Night School acquisition, or the partnership with them, is the right direction. You know, that's a serious game studio that people in the gaming space really respect. I don't know much about the one that they've just partnered with, I don't think, but...
No, but they're in the mobile space again.
Yeah, so I think it's that. Like, they're probably starting slow, they're probably testing the waters, they're trying out in certain markets, like you say, because we don't have it here yet, but I think we're a ways away from, you know, Netflix on your TV offering significant gaming experiences. But
sure,
if in the next couple of years we start to see like Telltale type stuff on there or whatever, I think that could really work. Yeah,
that's the sort of thing. And again, more stuff like Bandersnatch.
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
And just before we move on, I just want to say that we are aware that PlayStation have a State of Play showcase around Gran Turismo 7 tomorrow as we record this, but it will be yesterday as you're listening to it. So we can't comment on that. We're sure it will be fine.
Yeah, it'll look like Gran Turismo.
It'll look like Gran Turismo. Neither of us are massively interested in Gran Turismo, but it is an important franchise for PlayStation. Hope it goes well. I doubt there'll be anything groundbreaking there, though, if I'm totally honest.
No.
Alright, Lewis, time for a beer, and then we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our play-along of Hades. Hades is the fourth game by Supergiant Games, the others being Bastion, Transistor and Pyre, all of which we have now played as play-along games. Hades, I would say, is probably comfortably the most popular of the four, coming out in 2020, being nominated for, and winning, frankly, a lot of Game of the Year awards. The game itself sees you play as Hades' son Zagreus as he tries to escape from hell. The game is a roguelike, or probably more accurately a roguelite. So you basically have many runs and attempts to escape, dying a hell of a lot along the way, and when you do, you start right back at the beginning again. But the game itself is basically an isometric hack and slash adventure game. You think that's fair?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. In terms of the core of it, I would say so, yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm just going to get stuck into this because I think that my opinions around this may be controversial, to say the least. First of all, I need to start by saying art style, absolutely out of this world. Fucking fantastic. Same with the music. Typically Supergiant, absolutely great. Totally nails it. However, I sort of do find that this game was pretty underwhelming. And I think that part of it is because I was expecting something, I don't know, quite special or quite different or quite interesting in some capacity. And in actual fact, Hades is precisely the game I thought it was going to be. And that it was a roguelike. And it was like a lot of other roguelikes. It wasn't that interesting. And to be clear, I have went on record numerous times on this podcast saying that I don't particularly like roguelikes, and that definitely minimised my enjoyment of the game as well. I'm not saying that this is a bad game, to be clear. I think that would be totally disingenuous for anyone to play this and say that it is a bad game. It is in fact an incredibly well made game by a studio of very, very talented people, and I would say it has done nothing to diminish how I think about Supergiant. You know what I mean? They are a very, very talented group of people, and I would be over the moon to play their next game. I just don't think that this was particularly for me, and I probably would put it as, believe it or not, despite the fact that it was the most popular, despite the fact that it won many Game of the Years, I would put this as probably one of their weakest games.
Oof.
I know. Like, that's really controversial. I'm not just saying that to be controversial. Do you want to hear some other controversial takes?
Keep going, yeah.
Right. Well, see, considering that in Game of the Year 2020, and I know that there was a lot of kind of weirdness around The Last of Us Part 2, but there is no competition here. The Last of Us Part 2 is miles better than this game. Like, it's not even in the same ballpark as far as I'm concerned. And potentially even a hotter take, I would regard, as far as roguelikes go, I honestly think that Returnal is a much more creative, more diverse, and more interesting game.
That's just because you like shooting stuff, Mark. That's all that is.
You can shoot stuff in this game.
I know, but you shouldn't, basically. That's the one weapon.
Actually, I hard disagree, because the spear, as we have discussed, is actually a bit OP and probably the easiest weapon.
But it's not really shooting, though, is it? It's not exactly the same.
It's throwing a spear from a great distance and
Yeah.
shooting something. I mean, in the context of this game,
You can
not
try both
pretty
of them
similar.
and see which you prefer.
All right, okay. Anyway, sorry, right. I gather that you feel quite differently.
I feel much more in line with the vast majority of critical consensus. Not that devalues anything that you've just said.
No, it doesn't, and I'm totally willing to admit that I am fully on an island by myself here.
I guess, yeah, to give my kind of quick flip of all that, obviously agree, art style wise, character design wise, enemy design wise, and musically, well, we'll come back to that.
Right.
Musically, in some ways I actually think this is weaker musically than some of their other games.
I would actually agree, but it hits. It's on point for what it is.
It's that most of the time you're not actually able to pay any attention to it because the game is so frenetic, and it's only at kind of certain moments where there's one track in particular that is just a guitar, it's just an electric guitar, there's nothing else going on in it, that cuts through the noise of the gameplay, and when I hear that that's on, I'm suddenly like, oh yeah, this is the good stuff.
Yeah, but I think it is like with the musical stuff, sorry, just to pinpoint that, because it is something I genuinely thought was fantastic in the game, is the way that they use music in those like poignant moments. Like all the music's really good, to be honest with you. If you listen to the Hades soundtrack, I'm sure it would absolutely fucking slap, frankly.
Totally.
But like their use of music within the game is just fantastic, and has been throughout all their games. It really, really has, and this is no exception whatsoever.
But then on top of that, like some of your other criticisms there, I mean, don't get me wrong, at its core, obviously, it is a hack and slash, procedurally generated action game. It's not revolutionising anything there, but I think it's extremely tight in what it's doing.
I would agree with that as well, because all Supergiant games they have absolutely zero fat on them.
Zero fat, and just, good, clean fun to play. I mean, there's a real dopamine hit as you're going through this where you're just clearing rooms, you're clearing bosses, you're getting stronger all the time. You're kind of, what I really like about it, a couple of things I really like about it. I like that no run feels like a waste of time, and I think that this might be a difference in how we've played it. Again, I should foreground here that I haven't beaten the game, and in fact I suspect I've probably seen less than half of it in terms of...
I can confirm that you are. And also, can I just say, to back up my point, I've beaten the game 10 times.
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. So, like, I have yet to beat the final boss for the first time, and you have to do that 10 times more to get the final ending, I suppose, or to get the...
To roll credits, basically, to get the the true ending. Well, again, I'm not even sure that is the true ending because I now know that there's an epilogue after this as well. So fuck knows what that ending is, but I wasn't playing it anymore. So I put in the time, ladies and gentlemen, to be clear. Like, this wasn't a half-arsed thing on my end. I beat the game fucking 10 times.
And this for me, like, I'm going to continue playing it, having not seen the final ending or even the first ending of many, not seen how the story progresses beyond where I'm at. I'm loving that side of it, but to stick to what I was starting to say there, the idea that no run is worthless, you do take stuff out of your runs and you do upgrade yourself at the end of each run, and you can start to tailor your gameplay quite early on. I really like that, because a true roguelike, I think I would just, like when we played FTL before, it's very frustrating in reality. Once you start getting good at it in particular, and then you lose, like your first few runs are fine, but in Hades it's like your first few runs, you're going to be terrible, and you really struggle to even get into the second biome, Asphodel, and certainly getting anywhere within that is really tricky. But quite soon after that, you're putting it together, you're starting to find that the Bone Hydra, the second boss, is a lot easier to get past, even though he's really difficult the first time you face him, so on and so forth. You are able to affect how you play, and you can start to see what weapons you like and all that stuff. That all builds into it. And then the flip side of that as well is that I think, like, narratively, again,
this is going to be interesting.
Well, again, and I haven't seen it all, so I don't want to say everywhere that it's gone. I can't speak for all of that. What I've seen so far, I'm very interested in, but parking what is actually happening in the story, I think the way that it's delivered, like what this is an ensemble piece, right? This is actually a story about all of the gods and Zagreus in the middle, and and his kind of familiar line, right? Like, it's very early on that they introduced the idea that Persephone is his mother. Like, I'm fairly well versed in Greek mythology. I've been interested in it since I was a kid. People who have studied it probably will see things in this that I don't, and people who have no less than I do will see less. I think that is a really big part of it, is that all of the gods all have quite specific and interesting personalities, and they all connect with Zagreus in different ways. And then the relationship between him and his father, Hades, is so... I think it's really, like, emotive and powerful, because it's not done to death. You're not constantly in these big long dialogues with them, but you, from minute one watching Hades speak to Zagreus, you knew it wasn't like he doesn't hate him. Hades absolutely loves Zagreus, I think, but he is just really fucking broken. He's a broken god, because I mean, what I know about the Persephone myth sort of tells me where this is going to go without kind of knowing all that. And so I could be wrong, again, like, I haven't played it all, so maybe it goes off in directions that won't be so interesting. But every bit of dialogue, every time you run into one of the other, like the first time I met Patroclus, who's one of these NPCs that you kind of can get some bonus materials from in Elysium, the third biome.
Yeah, so there's like one in every
there's one, there's Sisyphus, there's Eurydice, and there's Patroclus. And like the first time I met him, I was like, this is fascinating. Like, you're getting this other guy, and he connects back to Achilles, who's in the House of Hades, who I've been talking to from the very first moment of the game. Or for so long, I was talking to both Orpheus and Eurydice, but Zagreus doesn't know that they know each other, and they don't know that they've all met. And so you as the player, I was about to say as the reader, and I'll touch on that in a second as well, but all of that, like, you start to create your own micro narratives within all this, the kind of meta narrative of him and Megara, and then the relationship with her and her sisters that starts to, like, you talk a lot about show don't tell, and obviously it's all tell in its way, because it's all these sort of semi, like, it uses the same thing that Pyre does. I can't remember if Bastion and Transistor had this as well, but that kind of visual novel style of
no, that was a change up for Pyre.
That came in Pyre, right?
Yeah. Part of the reason why they did the roguelike thing is because they found that people weren't like replaying Pyre to find all the stuff, whereas this forces you to do that. So that's why they went in that direction. So also just suits them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it does. Like, they put this through early access, they learned through player feedback, and I really think that element of storytelling, because Pyre was like, there was so much going on in Pyre, there's so many potential endings, but fuck me, it was a long game in the end, and once you'd played through it once and you got your ending, that was enough, right? Like, there was no way you were going back to do more of that, I don't think, and I guess that's what they felt. But with this, every run, depending on what you do, who you die to, and what kind of stuff you choose along the way, it all kind of starts to talk to itself. I'm not saying that that's perfect, and from where you are at the end of it, you might say, well, actually, maybe the narrative doesn't pay off, but that
I can confirm it definitely does not.
That type of storytelling, I just think, is really interesting. Like, it's using its form as a game. You know, what it could do is just play literally a cutscene every couple of runs, and it doesn't.
No,
do that,
I definitely get what you're saying. Like, I like the ensemble. That was cool. Like, I think that they had written like 300,000 lines of dialogue for this or something like that. Don't quote me on that number. That is, I'm pulling that out there, but like, it was a ludicrous amount of dialogue. And as I said, so I played this game. I don't know how many runs it ended up taking me, maybe like 35-ish, say, and beat the final boss 10 times. And I don't think I heard a repeated line of dialogue once, which is enormous testament to the writing. However, I felt as though while it was broad and very well researched, and it felt very authentic to the world and whatever, it was broad but not deep. I didn't feel like. Is that what I mean? Yeah, I'm sticking with that. I'm sticking with that. Instead of that. I don't feel as though a lot of it did pay off, and I don't know if you just have to keep playing it for some of the stuff to pay off, and then a lot of it was just, I don't know, it felt shallow. And like, I thought that this was arguably the worst writing of all their games.
Oh wow!
That's too strong. I'm already taking that back.
Yeah,
I think it's less strong than Pyre, although I think it might actually be a better game than Pyre, to be honest. It sort of depends what you want, though, because the action in this is much better. But I actually preferred the writing and the story in that. Like, I thought that the quality of the prose in Pyre was like next level, was incredibly good. Also, I thought that the way that Bastion was written and it was all narrated to you was fantastically good as well. Like, and is it Christopher Logan?
Yeah.
And Bastion, his performance in this is fantastic as well, but in Bastion particularly was outstandingly good. Yeah, I just felt as if this wasn't as good or as interesting. And I don't know, maybe they've just set a bar so high for themselves. Again, I'm not saying any of this is bad. It's well written. It's just not as well written as I thought that it might have been. And I don't think it was as well written as like the core story.
Yeah.
I don't think that paid off as it had to make it feel like it was well written, while it was broad, and the interconnectedness of it all and the wider world, you know what I mean, the web that is sort of cast between all the characters is really interesting and cool, but the core story for me fell very flat almost always.
That's interesting, and I can't challenge that, obviously, because I haven't seen how it pans out. And
I will say that
more frustrated now that I haven't beaten it than I thought I was going to.
What I will say is that when you beat that final boss, you meet Persephone, and every time you beat that final boss, you meet Persephone.
Yeah.
And it all feels quite tedious after that, to be honest.
Like, I can imagine having to go through that 10 times without a great amount of change.
I thought that, so for example, I thought that the gameplay in Pyre was weaker, right? I think it would be impossible to make an argument against that, I think. But the story was so good, was so interesting, was so creative and strange and well written that it just kept me going. It kept me playing these matches that I found very straightforward and not particularly interesting to play over and over and over again, whereas the combat in this felt a bit like a slog, because after I beat him 7, 8 times, I was just like, I'm not getting anything from this now, do you know what I mean? And the narrative didn't carry it, and I thought that it would. That's what I thought it was going to do. Like, I thought that, this will be a roguelike, but I know that each run matters, and the narrative progresses throughout it, and blah 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 blah, and I just thought that the narrative wasn't there, to be honest. Also, a little bit on that action, I would say. It does become very repetitive and button bashy, I would say, as opposed to other like Transistor and Bastion, like, allowed you to have 2 weapons or like 2 attacks and stuff like that as well, as does this. But it feels as if you're, I don't know if encourage is the right way, but the best way to get through the game is to either upgrade your attack as much as you can or upgrade your special as much as you can, and therefore you just use that throughout the whole thing. You know what I mean? And you just bash that one button over and over again. And again, when you're on run 26, that becomes a bit tedious.
That to me is the main or maybe only real criticism I have of it, and I don't know if that isn't a criticism of us rather than a criticism of the game, because I look at it and I go, there are 6 weapons, there are like 30 keepsakes or whatever, there are, you know,
but that so
hang on.
You're picking on an interesting point here as well.
But there are like a crazy amount of boons. Then where I'm at, and maybe it evolves even further, but you can add the Titan blood that you get from beating bosses,
which can change
their weapon and change that up. There's actually a lot of variety built into it. But my major criticism of all of Supergiant games, not just this one, is that there are systems upon systems upon systems that interlink and overlap and allow you to upgrade this, but take on a greater challenge in this place by, you know, making a sacrifice in this particular way, but you'll get better rewards in this way, and all that.
Wait till you beat the final boss, by the way. You're going to love what happens then.
And like, that's all really interesting, but I find it sometimes quite overwhelming, and that it's hard to then just be like, it becomes easy, I should say, to just do the same thing every time because you find a pattern that works. And I think you're right, like the simplest thing generally is just to spam triangle, as we were doing, like spam the special attack if that's the boons
spam the special attack on the spear with the keepsake that lets you find health in the levels is the easiest way to get through the game. I would counter that by saying in Bastion, like Bastion felt painfully balanced in that it basically didn't matter what you did, what weapons you had, what upgrades you done, that you could play the game equally as well with some other weapon or some other thing.
I think that's us though, because I've read guides, like I was looking for tips a couple of nights ago. It was when I first encountered the being able to change aspects of the weapons. I didn't know, I don't think you had done that, or you didn't tell me about it the first time that we played.
I wouldn't have told you about it, but I knew about it.
Yeah, you knew about it. So this came up and I was like, I don't know what this is. I kind of want some grounding because this feels like a precious resource and I don't want to spend it without understanding what the system is. So I started looking into it, and the guide that I was reading was like, the best weapon by a country mile is the bow. And I'm sat there going, the bow's fucking useless. Like, I cannot use the bow.
I don't know, like maybe it is then, but I just felt that the spear it had such range when you upgraded its special as well, which gave it even more range, and it upgraded its base attack. Like, it just felt as though this was like overpowered, and the best way to go about it. It felt as if the best keepsake was the one that kept you alive the longest, which is the one that gave you the health as you travel through the levels. And when that was upgraded, basically in every room you got a little bit more health back. And once you got all your death defiance, which were basically a life within the run, which you'd start off with none and can eventually get 3. Once you've done that, like, that's the loadout. That's like and fair enough, like, you can flick around with the weapons and stuff like that, but even the keepsake, like, you would be hard pressed to tell me that, like, starting off with an Ares boon is better than that. You know what I mean?
I agree with that. I think that is generally a problem in Supergiant games, that they put a lot of this stuff in. I think all of the chaos stuff as well, very briefly, you can enter this chaos chamber, you have to give up a portion of your life to enter it, but you get a sort of risk reward payoff at the end of it.
I will say that they become better later on in the game.
That's so far, every time I've done it, I've been like, okay, this is fine, but I would probably have rather they just kept going. But I feel encouraged to try a lot of that stuff. But in reality, keeping it simple is often the best thing. And in Pyre, I just kept it simple the whole time. I didn't use any of those debuffs that you could do, even though that unlocks other stuff. That's the one issue with all the Supergiant games for me, is that they're full of ideas, and often you can just kind of find your own path within that and just do that thing. And I wish that even with this, and maybe it will change the further I go on, like the more runs and as things change, I wish it found ways, and in all their games they found more ways to encourage you to try things differently. You know, even if it was literally as arbitrary as saying, like, you've used that keepsake once too many, you have to use a different keepsake this time. You would have to find some narrative justification for that, obviously, but something that made it not be the case where you could, you know, as I suspect you may have done, doing 10 victorious runs in a row with the same keepsake, the same weapon, the same aspects on that weapon, and really trying to get very similar boons. You know, not that that's within your control, obviously.
You're not wrong.
But and like that, I can see why that becomes tedious. So if the game finds a way to encourage you to do something else, then maybe it's different.
Honestly, the most frustrating part of the game was when I was trying to grind up and I was switching weapons all the time, because I very quickly found that I wasn't very good with some of them, and I was good with other ones. But anyway. And I do have to admit, like, a lot of my problems with the game, and I did try not and specifically mention these problems, but I do have problems with just the concept of roguelikes, right? I just don't like them, and I don't like procedural generation, and I don't think that is ever going to hold a candle to bespoke level design. I have a lot of other problems here, do you know what I mean? But I was trying not to focus on them and trying to focus on Hades. So unfortunately, Supergiant made their first game that I didn't particularly like. However, Supergiant are still a fantastic studio, and I would be very, very pleased to play their next game. And I'm not saying it's a bad game, I just didn't particularly like this game.
I mean, I would definitely recommend this to people. I would say have a look at it first, make sure that the gameplay, the actual core gameplay and the battles are something that you'd be interested in, because I think the rest of it carries it enough, and particularly when it's only like 15 quid as it tends to be at the moment. So I've really enjoyed it. I definitely intend on playing it further and beating it. Maybe not all 10 boss runs, who knows, but if I've not got something else that
if I don't like this and you do like this and I've played it more than you, that's ridiculous.
Well, then maybe that's why. But yeah, different opinions on it, but definitely Supergiant, they've got the stuff.
Yeah, fantastic
they
studio.
do next, I'm sure
top in the studio. Still love them. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And you can now review on Spotify, so be a double legend and do it over there as well. And Lewis, we have to tell everyone what our new play-along game is for February, and that will be Abzu by Giant Squid, the people who also made The Pathless, which you recently played.
I did indeed, yeah. So this is the first game from them. The Pathless was their second. I played that about a year ago now and really enjoyed it. I don't know too much about Abzu, I've got to say.
Me neither.
I think kind of quite a gorgeous sort of adventure game, slightly in the spirit of Journey, which I know that you were a fan of.
Yeah, really big fan of Journey. Love Journey.
So yeah, we're going to get stuck into that in February, and we're going to follow that up in March with The Pathless, which is a cross-generational title. It launched at the same time as the PS5 did. That's where I played it. A gorgeous game, not without its flaws, but really good. So we'll talk about that more in a couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. Very much looking forward to these two as well, man. I'm always looking forward to these indie games lists. It's very rarely that I put one on the list that I'm like, I fucking don't want to play that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.